Welcome to Schupak Sports, and today we have a very interesting guest, Mark Perry, who covers the USFL for the USFL News Hub. Mark, how are you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm
Very
doing,
good.
yeah, I'm doing really good. Mark, we just finished, and a lot of the fans, they're not that familiar with the USFL. I'm going to have you give a background, but before we do, apparently the championship game, the Stallions beat the Stars. It was 33-30. I understand it was a tremendous game.
Yep, I was there. I was in the press box and got a chance to meet some of the people in the USFL and then be on the field and ask questions to the players afterwards. So everybody in the press box, we just wanted a close game and we got a close game.
Yeah. Now, just could you explain to the fans what the business model is and was of the USFL and how they set it up playing in one city, and what do they intend to do next year?
So the business model. So first, we have to take a step back and talk about the XFL and AAF era, because that's kind of how we got there. So when Fox was working with the XFL, they were very happy with the product that they had. Then the XFL, everything happened. The XFL went bankruptcy. The Rock and Danny Garcia, Redbird Capital, bought the XFL. Fox worked with Brian Woods, who started the Spring League. That was something that was on Fox, and he had the IP for the USFL. So basically, they said, okay, let's spin up this Spring League, and this time we're not going to try to compete with the NFL. We're just going to try to keep everything in house and use Fox resources as a way to grow this league. They reached out to the NBC. NBC was like, hey, cool, we would love to be part of this too. We don't know how much money Fox received to air the games, but then you basically had games on Fox, NBC, and then USA Network, FS1 on the cable channels too. And so their business model so that was the first partnership. And then their business model is essentially play all the games in one location. So you have one, so this is something that the AAF and XFL ran into. The AAF, actually their Orlando franchise with Steve Spurrier was the head coach, they actually had to practice in Georgia because of laws and permits and insurance and all this kind of stuff. The XFL ran into the same issue. Oliver Luck got criticized a little bit because they didn't have all their permits in place for all the cities before he announced the cities. So the USFL said, let's just have everything in one central location. We know we're Fox. We're going to bring in just the players alone in the hotel rooms are going to be a lot of money. Let's find an area that's willing to partner with us to give us a little money for the hotel rooms. And then let's play all of our games in one central location. This way, all the equipment, everything is there. And they looked at Birmingham, Alabama, because they had recently just finished building a stadium. Their stadium was one of those things that, hey, we build it and we hope that they come, kind of thing. And that's been open for only about a year or two. So that they were able to bring in, everything was under, just played at that location. Essentially, the only home team was Birmingham Stallions. And that's kind of how their business model, at least on year one, is set up.
Okay, let me ask you this. This is what I want to understand. There were 8 teams. I'll just quickly for the fans: Birmingham, Houston, Michigan, New Jersey, New Orleans, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Tampa. They all played in Birmingham. Where did the teams practice? Like, where did the New Jersey Generals is the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where did they practice?
They all shared the same resources. And that was the whole idea of saving money and trying to use as minimal money as we can. Now, when Brian Woods worked with the Spring League, he would play they did a season, they had 4 teams and they played in like Indianapolis, and they played every game in Indianapolis. So it's that same kind of business model. Let's keep all the resources in one place. You have the Birmingham Stallions will practice at, facility A in the morning. And then in the afternoon, the New Jersey Generals will come in and practice at the same facility, using the same trainers, the same water jugs, the same footballs, all that kind of thing. So they can pool their resources together and try to save money, because football is expensive. I always give the analogy. My daughter goes to University of Jacksonville. They stopped football because it was too expensive. And so they cut the football program her first year there.
Right. Now, are they going to do the same thing next year? And have they designated a city? They're going to go back to Birmingham.
So the deal with Birmingham was for 3 years. I
Oh,
think part of the pushback that they got throughout the season was, the presentation of the empty stands was not a good look. Also, the term that I use is that there's no juice in these other markets. Like Birmingham loves the Stallions. I mean, I talked to people at the championship game that traveled 12 hours with their kids in the car to go to Canton, Ohio to watch the Stallions, and they were all in. But places like Philadelphia, I didn't hear anybody that came from Philadelphia to see this game. So for year two, there's talk of opening up a second hub city. And the rumor is that it would be Philadelphia. So this way you have the Generals, you have both, Pennsylvania teams there practicing. The problem with that is when Brian Wood set up the spring league, he did something similar where he had 4 teams in one location and 4 teams in the other. The problem was they never played each other until at the end of the season for the championship. And I'm afraid that they're going to go for that model. So that means, if you have 4 teams having to play 8 games, they're going to play each other like 2 or 3 times a season and not play the other franchises. So I'm worried that that's kind of where they'll go next. But they've been looking for investors to kind of put in another 150 to 200 million dollars to try to facilitate this expansion into the next location. They said 2 to 4. I'm guessing it would be 1.
right. And you said something quickly. A lot of the fans didn't realize it, that all the playoffs or just the championship game was played in Canton. How many games?
So the playoffs and the championship were played in Canton. The problem was once they got together, they said, Birmingham's the place. We're going to play all of our games in this brand new protective stadium, it's called. And then they were like, okay, they looked at the schedule and they're like, okay, there's a problem. Number one, there's a Garth Brooks concert at that stadium that was already scheduled. So they had to move it to an older stadium. So that was fine. But then there was the World Games, it's like the second tier of the Olympics, was held in Birmingham as well. And that's been scheduled for a couple of years. So they were like, okay, well, we can't play our playoff games in Birmingham. Where can we move our playoffs? And then they said, well, what about Canton, Ohio? It's got the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Fans could come in from Cleveland. They could fly into Cleveland to go see the games. When I was there talking to USFL people, they were kind of hoping that the Pittsburgh Maulers would make it to the championship game because they're so, it's close to Pittsburgh,
Right.
just a couple hours out. But that's how it turned out. It was those teams. And so, yeah, both playoff games played there.
And the championship game, I saw it had like 23,000, which is not that bad.
That's the size of the stadium is 23,000.
Oh, was it filled or no?
I would gather it was probably 80%.
Okay. So let's say it was about between 18 and 20. Now, I just want to take a step back for a second. With all the teams in one location, does that mean on the day off and when they're not practicing, they socialize with each other around town? Did it work like that?
Yeah. So basically all the players were in the same hotel. And so there was kind of this camaraderie between all the players because they all got to know each other and it didn't matter what team that they were on. Some guys went out and, rented places with a bunch of other players in the area. But for the most part, they were in the hotel together.
And, considering, and by the way, we're talking to Mark Perry, who covers the USFL, among other things, which we'll get into in a minute, for the USFL News Hub. After going through COVID the last couple of years, the word like bubble has become part of sports. So I guess maybe that kind of made it a lot more acceptable. Do you think that?
Yeah, I think what happened with the NBA, and they played the bubble in Disney World, all the other leagues said, hey, this is kind of a good idea because football is so expensive. We know the AAF came on board first, and then they blew through their money by week 8, and that was a failure financially. The XFL was fine. Vince McMahon put up $200 million. There's conflicting reports as to why they went bankrupt. Or why Vince McMahon let it in bankrupt, either because he was fearful of the WWE going under because they make a lot of money off their gate. The other rumor was that Vince McMahon, and this is not political, this is what I was told, was to pull a Donald Trump and put the thing into bankruptcy and then tried to buy it back at a cheaper price.
Right.
And so that was another, and Vince McMahon got criticized for that during the process. And then he was like, hey, I just want this league to survive. I'm out. And then that all of a sudden, that's when, and then the whole bankruptcy went, and then we got that story.
Again, we won't get to politics, but it was a nice reference because Vince McMahon's wife, I believe, worked for Donald Trump.
Yes. So, and Vince and Trump is part of the WWE Hall of Fame too. So they're friends, and the business guys, they've known each other for a long time.
And he's a former owner of the Generals.
Correct.
From going back there too.
Yes.
And that's how he developed his friendship with Herschel Walker.
Correct. Yep.
But anyway, all right, let's move on now. Before we get to you, Percy, a couple of things. What is the average salary of a USFL player?
So typically the minimum will be about 45,000. If you kind of ran the table, went undefeated, and won the championship game, you're talking maybe the top end will get 70,000. But we know that the quarterbacks made more. We're not sure what they made, but in general, that's kind of that 45 to 70,000. And people are like, well, that's not a lot of money, but it's only basically 3 or 4 months worth of work. Of course, you're putting your body through all that, and playing football is tough, but that is kind of the baseline there. So for a couple months worth of work, you can make.
Yeah. And I assume the practice squad players, they get something, they get less. Does the teams and the league, do they offer like per diem food money? I'm sure it's not up to scale of the NFL.
They offered money they gave initially, then they got criticized by the agents because initially the players had to pay the full price for the hotels, and they got a discounted rate. And I believe the discounted rate was like $150 a night. And they were like, well, but I'm not making but $2,000 a week.
Right.
And so the league kicked in, and I think it was like $75 a night. Like they cut it in half. But no food or any of that kind of stuff. I think for the most part, I mean, if they're practicing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I just saw that the Dallas Cowboys just signed linebacker Christian Sam. Mm-hmm. Is he the first player to sign from the USFL?
Yep, he is the first. There's rumblings of other guys. Agents are putting stuff out there that a guy like the Defensive Player of the Year, Chris Odom, is getting looks. The problem with the USFL versus the XFL is the XFL would have finished their season a while ago. With the USFL, they finished now, and basically teams kind of already have their practice roster, their 70-man roster kind of full at this point. So it'll be interesting to see. And now this guy he played on 2 different teams. The last one was the Breakers. Now he got on because they put somebody on injured reserve and brought him in.
Right.
So their business model was always like, okay, well, we'll get these guys will play a season for us. We'll skip March Madness, so we don't have to compete with that. And then we'll get our season done. These guys will be ready for camp, which is true. They're physically, they just played 10 weeks. But the problem is the NFL teams pretty much have their rosters set for training camp, because that's basically happening in less than actually at the end of this month.
Yeah, it's funny. They do, Mark, but if you look at the list of NFL free agents, it'll shock you. And besides like Odell Beckham Jr. and other players, it's really incredible how many players are still left. We're talking to Mark Perry. Mark, give us an idea of your background, how you got involved in this, where you went to school, and what you said you wear a couple of different hats. So tell us about Mark Perry.
So I was a broadcast journalism major at Salisbury University in Maryland, and realized that I didn't want to get into the radio business and television business because there wasn't a lot of money, but there was this thing called the internet, and all these people were making money. So I became a self-taught software engineer. So I'm a software engineer by day, and then I do this for fun on the side. I've always I loved radio. Grew up with Don Imus and Howard Stern and WFAN in New York. I used to listen to them religiously. So that's kind of where I got I could relive that stuff as I got older. But I had a wrestling site for a long time called allwrestling.com. And then Vince McMahon was spinning up this XFL, and he was bringing it back. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Let me just spin up an XFL News Hub site, and let's see where this goes. And Oliver Luck got hired, and I was kind of like, okay, pay attention a little bit more. And then, Bob Stoops came in, and that's when I really started to focus on it. And then the rest is history. Grabbed a bunch of guys from other places, young guys, kind of worked for XFL News Hub. And then, of course, things were building, things were looking great. You know what happened? Everything went under. And then, fast forward. So we were still doing the site, just kind of following the PJ Walkers, Jordan Tamus of the world, Storm Nortons. And I was like, all right, well, at least we'll follow their NFL career. Then I got to know a lot of people within the XFL, and they were telling me, hey, don't sleep on us yet. We think we have somebody that might buy this league. It's going to surprise you. Like, stay tuned. Don't give up. And so I was like, okay, I won't give up. And then, of course, the announcement that Rock and Danny Garcia, who's his ex-wife, but business partner, she's basically the brains behind his success as an actor and all Terramana Tequila and, Under Armour, like all that stuff. And then Redbird Capital is Jerry Cardinale, who's like, they have their hands with the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox and AC Milan. They kind of came in. And then when they came in, it was kind of, we were kind of waiting to if they would spin stuff up. And then all of a sudden we heard about the XFL and CFL in talks, and they wanted to kind of merge or kind of talk to each other. So I was like, okay, well, let's spin. I didn't know anything about the Canadian Football League. So, hey, let's spin up a site. It gives my guys a chance to, learn about the league. So we started CFL News Hub, and now it's in its second year. Then those talks fell through. And then all of a sudden, over the summer last year, the USFL said, hey, we're going to come back and we're partnered with Fox. Spin up another site. So now we've got 3 sites covering these football leagues.
Are you self-sustaining by advertising? I mean, you
Yep.
don't work. Oh, you are. Okay. There you go. All right, let's get back to the league, and we're talking to Mark Perry for the USFL News Hub. Explain to the audience, because I thought it was fascinating. After a touchdown is scored, the USFL gives 3 options. Name all 3 options. And the last one you're going to name, I'm just curious how many times that was tried.
Most, I would say 90. Wow, I'd probably say 98% of the time it was just extra points.
Right.
They didn't go for 2. They didn't go for 3. The 2-point conversion was kind of similar to the NFL. The 3-point is essentially just farther back and a pass play. They didn't try anything that. What was interesting is during the championship game, so Philadelphia comes back and they score. And in the USFL, there's a rule. You can either do an onside kick, or you get the ball at the 30 and it's a 4th and 13 or 4th and 12. I'm sorry, 4th and 12. And if you can convert that 4th and 12, you get the ball back. It's essentially just like an onside kick.
Right.
So Philadelphia tried it and they didn't make it. And then, the rest is history and the game was over. My thing is, if that had succeeded and that helped Philadelphia come back and win, that would have been the story over all of sports news about this comeback and this rule. So they have a lot of different tweaks to the rules, like rather than the NFL.
Sure. And one of the rules that I looked at, Mark, I thought was really interesting is they on the pass interference, when it occurs 15 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. Can you explain that and how that works?
So they wanted to, so all plays were reviewable, and Mike Pereira, you've seen him on Fox. He is the head of officiating. So he's in the booth at every game reviewing these calls. And I remember him talking about it because they some pass interferences are not as blatant as others. And that's why they wanted to have a kind of, some pass interferences were less, rather than, somebody throws a bomb and it's a pass interference and then they get the ball at the 2-yard line. That's what happens in the NFL. With them, they were like, well, he didn't like yank him down, and it was kind of more of an incidental contact. So let's do 15 yards instead. So, and it was kind of up to interpretation. And he was in the booth rewinding and everything and checking the footage out.
Did that happen a lot during the year? From what
I would say that, yeah, way more than, the point conversions. Now, one of the criticisms that I heard from football people when watching the league was, holding is kind of everywhere in the NFL, but because the offensive line play is not up to the NFL level, which even the NFL level is not like amazing. I mean, they're way better than the guys in the USFL and some other leagues, that they were kind of allowing a little bit more holding taking place because, they were trying to, make sure that the gameplay was smooth. Right. So they kind of let that go a little bit when it came to the rules.
Yeah, it seems like they're kind of promoting the big plays for the fans. Everything seems to be fan orientated. And I just want to ask you too, why I got interested in this, Mark. And again, we're talking to Mark Perry, USFL News Hub. I read that 50% of the 2023 season ads are sold out. Did you, when you heard that, were you surprised at all, or no? You expected it?
The one criticism I heard, it wasn't like they were getting top dollar. So that was one thing. I was like, well, yeah, because it's not, it wasn't the, you know, it wasn't this super expensive, but they keep touting the fact that their ratings are just as good as MLS, as Formula One racing. And that's a big sign, because when they originally started the league, they kind of announced it in June and everybody had already made their plans for advertising for the season. Now that they've have data, now these companies are already coming in and saying, hey, we already got a 50% sold. I mean, that's fantastic. And that's where they built this league. This league is for television ratings.
Right. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I agree with you. From what I see, television ratings. I also think, the little I know, again, I probably know enough that's in your pinky, but it seems that they really are promoting the gambling end of it. I wanted to ask you, and take it for someone who's not a gambler, but I think it's a good indication. Did they offer like different types of prop bets in the USFL this season?
So one of the things they promoted was their own Fox Sports Bet app. And that was kind of a key. Now, I couldn't get it in my neck of the woods because I tried it. And I'm like, I can't even bet on, on Fox Sports Bet app. But in other places you could. And they were telling me, yeah, there's all sorts of prop bets. And so basically the idea is like, hey, let's spin up our own league. And not only can we make money off of advertising, potentially selling the franchises down the road and the valuations going up, unlike the CFL, for example, who is flat.
Right.
They can go and also funnel these people to their sports gambling app and saying, hey, you can make all these kind of bets on the Fox Sports Bet app or whatever it's called. And they can generate revenue that way too.
Gotcha. If you could change one thing going into next season for the USFL, what would you do if you were in charge?
As much as I have a feeling they're going to set up a hub in Philadelphia, the way I would probably do it, and it would probably be more expensive, is take a page from what the XFL is doing. So the XFL is coming back in February, and they're going to be housed in Dallas, Texas. Everybody's going to practice. Everybody's going to train. All the teams are housed in Dallas, Texas. They have 3 teams in Texas, so the travel is going to be easy. And then on home games, they're going to fly those teams to DC, to Seattle, and to all these other locations. And then as soon as the game's over, fly them back to Dallas to keep, there's insurance costs. This is like sharing resources. So that's what they're doing. I think the USFL could do something. They just need the local markets to get a little taste. And if I was the USFL, what I would rather do is, we're going to play one home game in each market, and that's it. Forget this other hub thing. We'll play most of our games in Birmingham, but hey, Philadelphia fans, there's going to be one game that we play in, this location, and just do it that way, because at least each home market gets a little taste of it.
It's a great thing. And I was going to say the exact same thing. Just do one game. I remember, and you're from Long Island, I guess it was 1 or 2 years ago when the Islanders actually played a few games in the Nassau Coliseum. I thought it was a great idea. While the other arena was being built, they kind of split it between where they were playing Brooklyn and the Coliseum, I believe. But I think that's a great idea. Now, the tickets are very modestly priced. How much it costs to get into a game?
So it's $20 per person, but kids under 14, I think, are free.
Right.
And that's what they were doing. The funny thing is that the CFL got wind of this, and the Edmonton Elks started doing the same thing. They're like, for this, now the gate is a huge revenue generator for the CFL. That's how they make their money, is off of the gate. So the Edmonton Elks decided to do the same thing, because the CFL has a problem with their fan base is very much older. So this way it brings the kids in, and they absolutely took that straight from the USFL.
Gotcha. Okay. And we're entering the 4th quarter. We're going to close this out soon. We're talking to Mark Perry, who covers the USFL, among other things, for the USFL News Hub. Mark, do they do anything with as far as like, do they have yearbooks for each team and do they have football cards for players?
They don't have, I haven't seen any football cards or any of that kind of stuff. They do have NFTs and I have purchased them. So you can go and get a team NFT. And the interesting thing about the NFT is that you get a discount. Like I got $30 off of a purchase. I got free tickets to the championship game as part of my team NFT. And then they have player NFTs. And so I got 4 of them. I mean, they were like, $10 a piece or something. But the interesting thing is, unlike, cards, football cards, which the XFL had, I think even the AAF had, but I have not heard anything. I know they got pictures done, but I haven't heard about any sets coming out. What's cool about the NFTs is that, like, if I bought, like, Scooby Wright had a big game, he had an interception that basically closed out the game, ran it back for a touchdown. He's a former XFL guy too. I bought his NFT. If I'm able to sell that NFT for $20, like, Scooby Wright gets a piece of that action.
Sure.
And if it gets sells for 200, and if it sells for the next 10 years, Scooby Wright gets the money for that. And that's what I like about it.
A lot of people, Mark, are not that familiar. I'm just learning about it. Just explain in like 30 seconds or less what an NFT is and what it stands for.
So it's a non-fungible token. That's nerd talk for crypto. That's a crypto thing. Think of it as it's a digital collectible. And some people are like, well, why would I want that? And it's like, well, why did anybody want Beanie Babies? Or why didn't anybody want, and we're living in a society where, the phone is such an important thing that people are like showing pictures all the time. So it's a digital, think of it as a digital collectible, but it's more than that because, like the, for example, with the game ones, I mean, the player ones, they're getting a cut every time I sell it. I sell a baseball card, no one gets a cut except for me and the person that's doing it. And I get money too for selling it. With the team ones, they were giving like special access to games. Like you could go, one of the things they did during the game is on the big scoreboard, they had a QR code. And if you went to the QR code on your phone and clicked the link and signed up, like you were getting a commemorative NFT that will be dropped in your wallet later date. And, it's going to have all sorts of stuff. And they were doing things like if you had a team NFT and you were at the game, you could scan things and get rewards and prizes and merch, so there's another football league called Fan Control Football. They're based in Atlanta and it's basically an indoor football league. And you can become a team owner by owning an NFT. And one of the things that they did with I had one NFT from them, is that all of a sudden in my wallet was like, hey, you just won a signed helmet. And so you go here and, and so I'm getting shipped a Fan Control Football. It's that kind of interactive things, but it's also not an easy on-ramp to then it's just going to buying a pack of cards. So that's kind of the problem.
Gotcha. And this is where everything's going. This is where things are going with the college name, likeness, and image. All right, we're going to close this out. A few quick questions you can answer in one sentence or less. Best offensive player in the USFL in 22.
Oh, Darius Victor. He was the MVP. Well, I would say Darius Victor. Cavante Turpin was the MVP, but Darius Victor was the offensive player of the year.
Best defensive player in 2022.
Oh, Chris Odom by far. I mean, lots of sacks. I mean, that's why NFL teams are looking at him.
Okay. First player to become a starter in the NFL from the USFL.
That would start a game at the beginning of the season. I thought Kyle Slaughter, but he kind of was injured, and I don't know if any of these guys will be a starter in the NFL.
Okay, I think the pipeline to me is always like special teams.
Yeah,
and if I was on a roster, I'd say, Coach, put me on every special team, and you just go crazy. That's what I think these NFL coaches will look for. Okay, in 3 years, how many USFL franchises will there be?
Oh, I think they would at least expand to 2 if they make it to a season 3. That's going to be the tricky part because we have to see how season 2 goes.
Okay. All right. Last question. Who was the best coach in the USFL this year?
I mean, I liked Mike Riley of the New Jersey Generals. He won Coach of the Year as well. I mean, that team only lost really one game, and it was the Stallions in the beginning of the season. I mean, they had the best, offensive players, and he's a great guy. If you ever get a chance, and I know this is one sentence or less, but the Fox partnered with the NFL Films to do a TV show called United by Football. And it's basically behind the scenes, 30 minutes. If you got the Fox Sports or Fox app, or you can watch it. Check out those episodes, because Mike Riley, it gives you a great behind the scenes about how these people are in real life. And he's a great guy.
I remember when he was at Oregon State, he did a heck of a job out there for a few years. Yeah. It's funny because you look at his resume. This guy, I mean, he must have the best wife in the world. He's been all over the place, everywhere, college, NFL, back and forth. It's been unbelievable. Mark Perry, this has been very, very enlightening. Just tell everybody where they could follow you. Say it slow. I'm going to hold it up. Go ahead.
So it's USFL News Hub. That's USFLnewshub.com. You can also look up USFL News Hub on Twitter, the USFL News Hub on Twitter. We're on all the social media stuff.
If I hold the right Twitter follow for you?
No, it's actually the USFL News Hub. Somebody stole it, got that one. But go to USFL News Hub on YouTube, and I have a video of my experience in Canton, behind the scenes, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Football Hall of Fame. It was a lot of fun.
Mark Perry, I want to thank you. I predict you are going to be doing bigger and better things eventually. You're doing a great thing right now. I appreciate it, and I hope to have you on in a pre-show for the next season. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.